Redditor 1. I still remember the sparks, first tiny golden embers drifting down from the sky like fireflies on steroids, though they weren't supposed to be there. It was late November in Lakeland, Florida, and the festival grounds were alive with the hum of bass and laughter. The air sticky with spilled beer and sunscreen. I'd arrived just after sunset, my friend Jeremy Mason already lost somewhere in the crowd, and the horizon was melting into those soft oranges and pinks you only get when Florida decides to show off. 10:27 p.m. That's when I saw them. 3 glowing orbs in perfect chevron formation, hovering over the main stage like celestial sentinels. Everyone around me assumed it was part of the show. Our festival was famous for drones and light rigs, but these lights moved too fluidly, too deliberately. They traced impossibly tight circles, then looped into perfect figure eights, leaving trails of flickering sparks in the humid air. 10:32 p.m. I nudged the nearest group of revelers. College kids painted head to toe in glow-in-dark paint and pointed skyward. Their cheers died on their lips as they saw the impossible geometry of those lights. The after-image lingered in their eyes, faces suddenly etched with the same wonder and fear I felt. 10:35 p.m. That's when we heard it, a deafening roar that cut through the DJ's remixes like a scalpel. An F-16 screaming in low pass, its engines rattling every tent stake and beer can on the muddy ground. We looked up to see the fighter jet in hot pursuit of our chevron lights, but it was like watching a snail chase lightning. No matter how hard the pilot pushed, the lights danced away, twisting off in perfect arcs that should have shredded steel wings. 10:37 p.m. Sparks began falling. At first they were sparse, little pinpricks in the darkness. Jeremy, ever the brave one, grabbed my arm. "Dude, look at those burns," he said. We rushed over to where a handful of embers had landed, scorching perfectly hexagonal patches into the grass. Under a blacklight, those burns glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent green, as if the earth itself had been branded with an alien crop circle. 10:38 p.m., Jeremy, never one to let evidence slip away, knelt and reached toward a glowing spark. I yelled for him to stop, but he scooped it up on a whim, grinning like a kid who'd found buried treasure. His fingertips brushed the ember, and in an instant his whole body lit up from within. I swear I saw the bones of his hands, wrists, even his skull, glowing through his skin for a split second, before the light surged and swallowed him. His scream folded into the spark, and then nothing. 10:39 p.m. The hexagon where Jeremy had knelt shone alone, a perfect burn in the grass, and the air reeked of ozone and burnt flesh. I backed away, nausea twisting my gut, and noticed the festival lights flicker out. The speakers went silent, the crowd's chatter died in their throats, and a blanket of panic spread like wildfire. 10:42 p.m. In the chaos, the chevron in the sky did something extraordinary. Instead of fleeing, the 3 lights split apart, weaving intricate spirals around each other, an aerial dance that felt less like movement and more like a message. And then, with an almost mocking speed, they rejoined, formed their V-shape again, and shot off into the night, faster than any man-made craft could follow. The military's story came fast and rehearsed. No missing person named Jeremy Mason, no hexagonal burns, just reports of mumble-mouthed teenagers and scorched grass, blamed on vandalism. 20 of us who saw it were questioned, every one of us told to just calm down. Some friends admitted themselves to psychiatric wards, convinced they'd lost their grip on reality. But I have the photos, smeared streaks of light across my phone screen, all labeled UFO by someone who still believed. I have the recordings of twin sonic booms, the ground trembling beneath my feet. I even kept a vial of charred soil from one hex burn. I watch it sometimes under blacklight, and it pulses, a faint geometry of its own forming and reforming like a living fractal. I never talk about how those lights reacted to our stares, how they seemed to perform for us before they took Jeremy. I don't mention how I felt their eyes on me even after they left, hunters sizing up their prey. And I certainly don't tell them that last week I saw those same 3 orange lights over Tampa, moving in those same impossible loops. The sparks calling to something deep in my bones. This time, I didn't point. This time I ran. And I haven't stopped. because I know now that they're not visitors studying us. They're not lost tourists or top-secret tech. They are hunters with a flair for the macabre, and we are their audience, their entertainment. The burns at Lakeland still glow under the black lights I set up at home. I stand in their center sometimes, staring up, half daring the sky to give me that same impossible show. But I never watch too long. I'm too afraid they'll notice I'm watching and come back for an encore. And I'm not ready to be the next exhibit. Redditor 2. Misalauzest 5S. I still remember the pull of that midnight breeze off the cornfields, how it carried the scent of damp earth and dying stalks right up to my face as I walked along Highway 57. I was 16, restless and bored beyond reason, so bored that my friend Dave and I wandered out of Gratiot County with no destination except the horizon. It must have been past midnight when we hit that stretch of two-lane blacktop, headlights slashing weak arcs through the moonlight. 10:03 p.m. That's when I first saw it. An amber glow hovering over the northeastern tree line, bright enough to stop my heart for a second. In town, I'd have written it off as a street lamp or a passing helicopter, but out here, lights belonged only to those rare truckers headed to Savannah. And helicopters didn't pulse. They didn't drift like moons broken free from orbit. 10:05 p.m. Dave pointed, squinting into the distance. "Dude, that's moving wrong." The light jerked sideways, almost dancing, then hovered again. We climbed onto the hood of my dad's old Ford F-150 to get a clearer view. The glow resolved into a perfect sphere of yellow luminescence, about the size of a basketball if it were 3 feet in front of us. A dark ring sliced through its equator at a 45-degree tilt, wobbling like a hula hoop on a child's hips. 10:07 p.m. I felt a thrill of pure wonder. "Let's go closer," Dave said, and before reason set in, we were jogging down the asphalt, shoes pounding in rhythm with our racing hearts. The sphere drifted toward us, motion so fluid it felt ghostly after images in my vision, like sunset reflections on rippling water. 10:10 p.m. When we reached the width of the tree line, we stopped at the painted yellow center line, too afraid to step off. The sphere hovered 30 feet above the corn, its surface flawless. No panels, no seams, just that impossible glow. The ring quivered, casting shifting patterns on the roadside. I raised my hand as if to touch it. My skin tingled with static. 10:12 p.m. Then we heard it, a thunderclap of engines so close it shook the ground. Overhead, an F-16 slammed into view, afterburners flaring like twin suns against the dark sky. The jet dove after the sphere, outrunning our astonishment. We watched as the pilot chased circles around the orb, weaving high and low, fuel dump flames scorching the clouds. But the sphere kept pace, twisting through loops tighter than any fighter craft could manage. 10:15 p.m. Sparks began to fall, golden embers drifting down like star fragments. Dave yelped and jumped back as one landed at his feet. It sizzled, burning a perfect hexagon into the asphalt before fizzing out. We stared at the burn, 6 flawless sides glowing faintly under the moon. 10:16 p.m. Jeremy Mason's grin was epic. He knelt beside the mark. "I'm grabbing one for proof," he said, scooping an ember from the ground. I screamed for him to stop, but his laughter cut out as the spark kissed his fingers. For the briefest heartbeat, his entire body lit from within. Skeletal frames traced in glowing bone structures visible under translucent skin. Then the light exploded outward, and he was gone, boiling away into the night air, until nothing remained but that single hexagonal burn. 10:17 p.m. The festival, or rather the makeshift party we'd attached ourselves to, erupted into chaos. Car horns blared, people screamed, flashlights bobbed like fireflies. I stumbled backward, half-dazed, heart hammering. I watched the sphere drift back into view, its glow muted now against the turbulence. It split into 3 smaller lights, each carving figure eights around the jag before recombining and vanishing in a jagged streak eastward. 10:20 p.m. The jet pilot banked hard, then soared off into the distance, engines trailing sonic booms like distant applause. In the eerie afterglow, I almost expected to see Jeremy reappear, grinning, glowing, alive. but there was only the dark highway and my own ragged breathing. 3 days later, the police found his body, battered, eyes vacant, walking south on the opposite side of the road. His skin looked normal, but the coroner whispered they found microscopic hexagonal burn patterns beneath his fingernails. His parents moved him away that week, changed his records, made the world forget Dave Mason ever existed. Now, 27 years later, I can't look at a plane without checking its outline against memory. I still sleep with one eye open whenever a jet roars overhead, wondering if it's chasing or fleeing the unknown. Everyone calls it PTSD, insists I see shapes in clouds and park-controlled hallucinations. Medication helps dull the panic most nights. But there are nights, even on clear summer evenings, when my phone buzzes with phantom notifications and I'm back on Highway 57, watching a yellow sphere fold itself into madness. Last month, I drove that same blacktop, cornstalks whispering along the roadside, my knuckles white on the wheel. I saw 3 lights overhead, arranged in that old chevron pattern. They moved with those same impossible loops, red, white, and blue now, blinking in phony aircraft sequences that almost fooled my eyes. I didn't point them out this time. I didn't want to draw their attention. I floored the accelerator, tires screaming into the night. Behind me, the lights spun, beckoned, then shot away in a straight line, too fast for any jet to follow. And for one terrible moment, in my rearview mirror, I thought I saw the faint glow of hexagonal burns forming on the empty shoulder we passed, pulsing in time with my racing heartbeat. I'll never stop watching the skies, and if you see a plane that hangs a little too low, blinks in patterns that make you blink twice, don't look too long. Whatever you do, don't try to catch its sparks. Some things that shimmer in the dark never let you go. Redditor 3. I remember that night in December 2009 as if it were etched into my skull. I was 18, home for winter break in my grandmother's creaky old house in Northeast Ohio, the so-called thin place where legends said the veil between worlds was paper thin. I lay on my second-floor bed, earbuds jammed in, letting Tool's Jambi wash away the boredom of small-town life. The wooden walls creaked, wind whispered through the cracks, but I tuned it all out. Until the song warped. The guitars stuttered, the drums squealed, and in my ears there was this alien whine, like circuitry gone haywire. I yanked out the earbuds and my entire room glowed with a sickly green light that pulsed in time with that unholy frequency. It wasn't a beam or a spotlight. It was everywhere, a living mist that thickened the air. My heart pounded under my ribs as I sat up, searching for its source. Through my frosted window, I saw it rise behind the neighbor's roof. A vast triangular craft, its dark hull swallowing the stars. Under each vertex, 3 spheres of green energy crackled, as if lightning had been tamed into perfect orbs. They pulsed in sequence, left, right, top, like eyes blinking in unison, and each throb seemed to push against my skull, pressing thoughts into my mind that I can't fully recall. The house shook, picture frames fell, glass shattered, yet not a single footstep stirred in the hallway below. My family slept through it all. I understood then. The veil was thin, but only I had peeled it back far enough to notice. That's when the whispers began. Not in my ears, but in my head. They spoke in jagged geometry and colors I'd never seen outside of fever dreams. I understood them perfectly. They told me I was chosen because I saw beyond the 3-dimensional trickery. They told me the ghosts of the old farmstead, the shadow people at the edge of the cornfields, the impossibly silent lights over Lake Erie, all of it was part of their curriculum, tests to gauge my awareness. The green fog seeped through my window frame, slithering along the walls in fractal patterns that made my vision swim. I watched as the corners of the room stretched and bent, right angles melting into yawning curves. My mirror trembled, and when I looked at my reflection, I saw a delay. My eyes blinked a fraction after my lids closed. My lips moved milliseconds behind my thoughts. I felt the pattern in my veins shift, as though I were rewiring myself to match their geometry. I wanted to scream, but the green light clung to my throat, a wet membrane that twisted my voice into a grotesque chorus of overlapping frequencies. Instead, I slithered off the bed, each step a measured negotiation with the liquid physics now governing the room. My bare feet left no prints on the wooden floor. Instead, they sank slightly, as if I were walking through shallow water. They invaded not to abduct, but to recruit. In that half-world, I saw layers upon layers of reality, palpable realms bleeding through the wallpaper. Beings drifted in the outlines, winged creatures whose membranes stretched across more dimensions than human logic could contain. Serpentine intelligences curling through the space above my head, and the tall, silent watchers who slipped through walls as if they were mist. By dawn, the green light had faded, but the house never returned to normal. The walls still breathed, inhaling and exhaling in soft cracks that echo like distant thunder. My reflection no longer syncs perfectly. Sometimes I catch half of my face in the glass, the other half belonging to something else. Angles and ridges that don't belong to human flesh. My grandmother called me crazy. My friends called it sleep paralysis or drug-induced hallucinations. My therapist calls it paranoia. But she wasn't there. As the craft passed silently just above the treetops, its surface alive with patterns like living circuitry. She didn't feel the pressure as it pushed thoughts shaped like platonic solids into my mind. She didn't hear the chorus of impossible whispers that promised an invitation to step beyond my body and join them among the layers. I still live in that house, though now I barely sleep there. I drive miles away on nights when the moon is full, the sky unnaturally clear, and the air hums with static preternatural to winter. I've learned to recognize the telltale flicker in streetlights, the wrong-angled shadow cast by a simple lamppost. I've learned that if you stare at the thin place too long, it stares back, and if you let it notice you, it will hunt for a way in. Sometimes, late at night, I plug in my headphones and cue Jambi. The guitars kick in, familiar and grounding, and I close my eyes. In the background, beneath Maynard's voice, I hear that high-pitched hum return, like a digital phantom drifting in from beyond. The green glow still dances at the edge of my vision, and if I let myself go, I can trace the silhouettes of those 3 pulsing orbs slicing through my ceiling. I don't chase them anymore. I lock my doors and draw the curtains. I sleep under the weight of an old quilt, hoping the physical world will keep the thin place at bay. But I know it's watching, waiting for me to slip, to close my eyes one moment too long, and one day, I might finally heed their invitation, and the membrane between worlds will swallow me whole. Because the worst part of living in a thin place isn't seeing the impossible. It's realizing that once you do, you can never unsee it. Redditor 4. They never found Sarah's body. The rangers said she must have slipped off Enchanted Rock's sheer face in the dark, but I know that's not what happened. I know because I watched her play their game. I know because sometimes, on clear nights, I still catch a flicker of blue light in my peripheral vision, hear that metallic click-click coming from the woods, and taste the copper on my tongue from the final flash of brilliance that took her. It began like any other December camping trip in 2010. Sarah and I picked a site a quarter-mile west of the Granite Dome, our tent pitched beneath a sky smeared with stars. The wind whispered through the pines, the air was sharp with cold, and the massive outline of Enchanted Rock reared above us. Silent, ancient, indifferent. 9:07 p.m. We'd spent the evening roasting marshmallows and trading ghost stories. My head ached from laughter and sugar. When the fire dwindled, we settled on our backs to stargaze. I heard Sarah's voice call my attention to a single light low in the southeastern sky. At first, it looked like a bright star, but it moved, flickering like a heartbeat. 9:12 p.m. I passed Sarah my headlamp. "Flash," she whispered, voice trembling with excitement. I chattered the beam once, and the light in the sky climbed higher. Twice, and it sank. Again, and it lifted, slower this time, as if learning our rules. 30 minutes of this cosmic call and response, and I felt a thrill of wonder that turned to dread when those glowing pulses began carving patterns, perfect hexagons, triangles, across the firmament. 10:00 p.m. The pulsations ceased. The light hovered, silent, then dove behind the trees. We should have packed up then, but adrenaline chained us to the grass. The temperature dropped. Our breaths steamed in the beam of my headlamp. Sarah shivered, not from cold, but something deeper. 1:03 a.m. That's when the real show began. Without warning, 6 bars of electric blue light appeared on Enchanted Rock's face, arranged in a hexagon about 50 feet across. They moved with inhuman speed. One bar raced the mile-long ridge in seconds. Another scaled the 500-foot drop like water spilling from a cliff. The bars traced impossible lines, etching glowing runes in the rock. I heard Sarah whisper, "They're writing something." Her voice was hypnotic, breathless. I felt like a claustrophobic witness to transcendence. 1:07 a.m. The bars turned toward our camp. I raised my headlamp, heart pounding, 6 beams locked on us. Sarah's face lit in harsh blue light, her pupils bulging, grin wide and eerie in the glow. "They want us to talk back," she said, handing the lamp to me. Her hand was ice cold. I hesitated. "Sarah, we shouldn't." But she had already begun more style flashes. ... The lights answered in kind, bar by bar, in synchronized rhythm. That's when the clicking began. Not branches or critters, but mechanical metal scraping. 1,000 tiny gears shifting in unison somewhere beyond the trees. Blue pulses flickered between trunks, casting long, insectile shadows that scuttled across the ground like living things. I yanked Sarah inside the tent, zipper snarling. She crouched at the mesh window, pressing her face to the fabric. I grabbed her arm. "We have to leave now." Her eyes glowed through the mesh. "They're teaching us something," she said, voice flat. "Don't you see?" I slammed the door closed. The humming grew louder, a vibration that rattled my teeth. The tent walls bubbled with light, the seams shivering like they'd been dipped in mercury. 3:23 a.m. When I awoke, I was alone. The tent glowed from outside with a steady, circular beam. Sarah sat at the mesh window again, unzipping it with hands that shook. I shouted her name, but she never turned. The beam swept past me, illuminating the grass in perfect hexagons, 6 glowing tiles leading toward her. "She can't." I lunged for her, but a force held me against my sleeping bag, an invisible hand pressing my chest into the floor. I heard a dozen metallic clicks, then the sound of something shifting inside her. Soft, wet, incomprehensible. When I finally forced myself up, the blue light winked out. The tent was still as a tomb. Sarah was gone. All that remained was the pattern on the ground, 6 perfect hexagons glowing faintly under the pre-dawn sky, and her flashlight, beam still aimed at the empty darkness. They scoured the rock for 2 weeks. No trace of her. The hexagons they blamed on drunks with spray paint and lights. They claimed the footprints were deer. I never challenged it. Now, years later, I avoid camping under that dome, but sometimes, when I lie in bed and the wind shifts just right, I catch a flash of electric blue behind my curtains. I hear that click, click in my skull, and I know they're still out there, waiting to teach the next curious witness their impossible language. I've stopped looking at stars. Now I watch headlights on empty roads, patterns that flicker in and out of sync. Sometimes I glimpse my own reflection in a window at night and see angles in my face that weren't there before, geometry that defies human bone. They never found Sarah's body. Maybe she's still learning their lessons beneath the rock. Maybe she's teaching them in turn. And maybe one night, if I'm careless enough to flash a light at the sky, they'll come back for me, and I'll learn too much to ever be human again. Redditor 5. I crept back into Grandpa's attic at midnight, the house settling around me like a living thing. His leather-bound journal lay open on the dusty folding table, the German warning scrawled across the final page. Sie kommen durch das Wasser. My flashlight beam trembled as I flipped back, tracing the coordinates to a second lake, one I'd never heard of, farther north, where surveys say no body of water exists. Outside, the wind whispered through the eaves, carrying a distant click-click that sounded suspiciously like metal on metal. My heart pounded as I followed the new instructions. a grid of 5 hexagons etched into a star chart, points where water feeds into something below, something vast and silent. Grandpa's final note: bring salt water, they still taste salt. I drove all night, headlights cutting swaths through the pine shadows. By dawn, I reached a locked gate, chained and padlocked, with a stern government warning. But Grandpa taught me how to pick locks when I was 10, years before his eyes dimmed with something like dread. The chain fell away and I slipped inside. The lake had vanished. In its place was a vast concrete dome, painted light blue with rippling waves. A single hatch yawned at its center. My flashlight beam danced on its surface as I descended a slick metal ladder into darkness. At the bottom, the air was heavy with chlorine and something far stranger, an electromagnetic hum that made my teeth ache. I navigated a narrow catwalk until I stood over a circular chamber. The hatch above me creaked shut on its own, and the concrete walls began to shimmer. Below, water churned in an enormous tank, salt water. I could smell it. Inside, black metal structures sloped inward like ribs of a buried cathedral. As I leaned closer, the surface broke. 3 luminous shapes rose, perfectly smooth spheres, each ringed by a wavering black band. Their green-blue glow refracted through the water, the tank's glass walls bending their forms into impossible angles. Then they slipped free, emerging like drowned gods. They floated, no fins, no limbs, toward me. I tasted salt on my lips as the humming intensified, and a voice echoed in my mind, half German, half something else. Work beginnen dort, wo wir einst enden. We begin where we once ended. My flashlight died. The ceiling light snapped on, revealing shapes pressed against the outer walls of the dome. Silhouettes of soldiers in matte black uniforms, their helmets identical to Grandpa's drawings. Atop each, a single green orb flickered where a human eye should have been. Panic clawed at my throat. I stepped back and slipped on the wet catwalk. My hand clawed at the railing, but it gave way. I fell, splashing into the shallows. The water rose at once, up to my waist, then my chest, and still the shapes advanced through the glass. Impossibly fast, yet they never left their formation. My lungs burned. I tasted chlorine and metal as the water covered my mouth. I fought to swim back to the ladder, but their light refracted through the tank walls, creating mirrored corridors that looped on themselves. No path home. Then the 3 spheres plunged into the water around me, their glow sharpened, searing my retinas. I heard that click-click in stereo as if my own bones were assembling and disassembling. A hand, black metallic, pressed against my helmet's visor from outside the glass. The uniformed face behind it was still and patient. I heard no scream as I hit the glass, but in my mind, a final thought crystallized. They never left. The peace terms never ended. They only changed their battlefield, and they've been waiting for me to open the hatch. My flashlight flickered on one last time. I saw my reflection in the water's surface, my eyes glowing green, unblinking, unhuman. Then the light went out. When the maintenance crew arrived at first light, the dome was empty. No body, no footprints. Only the still, brackish air and the echo of the metal hum, waiting for someone else to discover Grandpa's warnings, to open the hatch again and taste the salt water that carries the invasion. They come through the water. And now I understand why Grandpa taught us German and why I can never look at a glass of tap water the same way again. Redditor 6. I still taste copper when I close my eyes, as if I'm back in that dark field 50 miles outside Memphis, clutching the phone like a lifeline. It was 1994, I was 15, and my friend Mike and I spent our nights talking about nothing in particular until the local streetlights petered out and the darkness pressed in. That December evening, I dragged my sleeping bag to the window and dialed Mike. We laughed about school and football until I saw it, a pulsing orange glow lingering above the tree line across the neighbor's field. At first, I thought it was a plane, but planes don't hang motionless, swaying like a metronome set to some dreadful beat. They don't inhale and exhale light the way that orb did. My heart thundered in my chest as I pointed. Mike, call the airport. I hissed into the phone. "There's something up here." But the airport laughed me off. "Radar's clean," the dispatcher said. "You're probably looking at a tower light." By sunrise, 6 classmates had seen their own orbs over Carter's farm, near Miller's Creek, even flickering beside the highway I drove every day. None of us could explain the silence that dogged those glows. No insects in the air, no crickets to drown out the hum, just that low mechanical pulse. Jenny Carter swore her cross necklace blistered her skin each time she went near the field. Tommy Wilson aced his physics exam the next morning, scribbling equations none of us could parse. Each of us developed the twitch, our heads snapping precisely 45 degrees whenever the orange glow flickered back in our dreams. A week later, I caught a whispered conversation behind the high school gym. Jenny, Tommy, and 4 others were speaking English, but wrong, as if each sentence was first composed in another tongue and translated by someone who'd only glimpsed our vocabulary. They spoke of grid coordinates and a convergence, and I noticed identical marks behind their left ears. Tiny orange circles, like someone had branded them with the smallest poker chip. Mike was the last to show the mark. We were on the phone again when his voice flattened. "Do you hear them?" he asked, awful calm in his tone. "They're calling us back." The next day, all 7 were gone. Their parents found notes in perfect block letters. The orange light showed us where to go. Search parties combed every swamp and hollow. No bodies, no tracks, just dozens of hexagonal scorch marks carved into the grass, each one so precise it looked like the imprint of a giant poker chip. The town blamed a cult or runaway teens playing a sick prank, but deep down I knew the truth. Some things don't vanish, they ascend. And some lights don't just glow, they harvest. Years pass. I left Tennessee for college, moved to Ohio, tried to bury that night beneath years of routine and rationality. I married, had a daughter, built the kind of life you hang pictures of on your living room wall. But nothing erases that taste of metal on my tongue. Last week, my daughter called from her dorm in rural Kentucky. "Dad, I see orange lights outside my window," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm not alone." My blood froze. I drove through the night, adrenaline my only fuel, snapping at every back road and blinking street lamp, haunted by every memory of Mike's final words. When I reached her campus, she was gone. The campus police found her roommate hysterical, saying my daughter's head had jerked at strange angles, her eyes dancing with that same orange glow, words tumbling from her lips like fragments of a foreign language. They discovered a scrap of paper on her desk, in handwriting that was hers, but not hers. Now you'll see what we all saw. Tonight I stand in my childhood field again, winter air brittle against my face. The field is overgrown, the old fence sagged, but every blade of grass still vibrates with memory. I watch the tree line until the sky fractures. A soft, swooping sound, then there it is, a football-shaped orb, breathing light just above the branches. My phone vibrates. Caller ID says unknown. I answer, and 7 voices whisper in unison, echoes of Jenny and Tommy and Mike and the others, low and urgent. "They come in 7s, Father. 7 by 7 by 7. The convergence is almost complete. Look behind your left ear. You've had the mark all along. You just couldn't see it until now." I press my fingers to the spot. I feel warmth, a tiny sun pulsing beneath my skin. The orb sways closer, beckoning, its light folding me into memory, into warmth, into fear, into 100 unspeakable truths. My daughter's laughter, distant and warped, drifts through my mind, trailing metallic clicks like funeral bells. I should run, tear back to my car, leave this hollow field to its ghosts. But already I feel the marks slow burn, a promise of transformation. The orange light flickers, counting down. The wind stills, the crickets fall mute. Somewhere behind me, a dozen scorched hexagons pulse in the grass. Coordinates for a destination I can't unsee. I close my eyes and taste copper again. They call me forward, 7 voices and 1 unending glow, teaching me to tilt my head exactly 45 degrees, teaching me to see the world as they do, where disappearance is ascension, and silence is only the pause before they arrive.